Portland, Oregon is a city that's been facing a significant homeless crisis for a lot of years now. Many people are wondering why this is happening and when will something be done to address this issue. Here's the good news. They've started. Now, there's many reasons for this, and I'm going to go over some of them for you. The first reason for the homeless problem in Portland is the lack of affordable housing. Housing prices in Portland and its suburbs have been rising rapidly, and many people can't afford to pay for a place to live. This has forced a good amount of individuals and families to live on the street or in their cars, because in a lot of cases, that's their only option. This video was done in March of 2023. I would say the homeless crisis in Portland, Oregon peaked somewhere in 2021. During the pandemic, the homeless population exploded in Portland. We've always had it, it was just never that bad. Obviously, the lack of affordable housing is just a small part of the big issue that's going on here. Another factor contributing to the homeless crisis in Portland is lack of mental health and addiction services. Many of the homeless struggle with mental health issues or addiction issues, and they don't have access to the support they need to get back on their feet. And some of them just don't want to get back on their feet yet. Portland has shelters and they put a lot of money into it. They just don't have enough shelters to go around. And a lot of them, especially the ones dealing with drug problems, don't want to go to the shelters because they can't do drugs in the shelters. Or they're suffering from some kind of mental issue which they don't want to have to follow rules. Or they can't. Shelters tend to have a couple rules. It's not just a free-for-all roof over your head. This parking lot to the left is at the entrance of what is called Chinatown. For at least 2 years, there was nothing but tents there. I'd say about 50 tents set up in that parking lot. I'm not sure when they finally fenced it off and chased everyone out, but I would say it was sometime after summer of 2022. I'm sure most of you heard about all the problems going on here in Portland, and I'm sure most of the things you've heard were greatly exaggerated. It's not good. I'm not saying it's nothing to worry about. It's just not as bad as they make it sound. You gotta remember, even news outlets and Twitter page and even YouTube channels like myself, we're all out to get the clicks. And a little exaggeration here or there gets the clicks. Another thing people don't talk about, and I'm going to get some grief over this one, policies that Portland had in place for years almost laid out the welcome mat for people to come to Portland to be homeless. If you're living homeless in Boise and the cops keep making you move your car or tear down your tent every day, and they actually arrest you for drug use, you're going to find your way to a place that's not doing that to you. Now, I understand homeless people are in a bad situation, and I feel bad for them in a lot of ways, but one of the biggest issues, and an issue they're actually dealing with now, is on display in the neighborhood I've been driving around. This is the Old Town neighborhood of Portland. Some people call it Chinatown because Chinatown is in Old Town, just a small section of it. You look at it on a map, Old Town is east of Broadway and north of Burnside. In Old Town, you'll find the famous Portland White Stag sign and Portland Union Station. You'll also find one of my favorite places in Portland. It's called Ground Control. It's an old school arcade. I love the place. But the Old Town section of Portland is where a lot of the, I call them sidewalk villages started. These are little tent cities. At their worst, you would find maybe 10, 15 tents next to each other on a single block. Now, it sucks and it's horrible that these people have to live on the sidewalk like that, and a lot of sympathy goes out to those people. But what about the business owners that are trying to run a business that may have been there for a couple generations, and now you got these tents in front of your front door and no one can come into your business, no one wants to come into your business? You got to deal with all the problems that goes with having a little sidewalk village right there? Well, people started complaining about it enough, and they've been complaining for years, that finally the city has started to do something. And I think the city started to do something when they started finally realized that their tax dollars were going to be going down, because business after business in Old Town and other parts of Portland were just closing up shop. It wasn't worth it. The city, like most cities, got hit pretty hard by all the businesses closing down because of the pandemic. Now you got to deal with this also. I only employ 5 people, but if I had an office in Old Town, Portland over the last year, I wouldn't want my employees coming down there for that. I would have moved. Well, the city's finally realized this and they've started to clean it up. And I can tell you, from my drive around and walking around Old Town on this day, there's maybe 25% of the tents that I saw 2 years ago down there. Nick Johnson did a pretty good series on the homeless up and down the West Coast, and he went to Portland, and that was back in 2020, maybe 2021, and he was there during the peak of it. I walked around some of the streets with him, and it was pretty ugly back then. It is so much better. Now, it's worse than most other major cities in the United States right now, but compared to what it was 2 years ago, they've done incredible work downtown. Now, you still have some tents and you still have the normal garbage going on down there, but it's getting better. They're playing whack-a-mole with them right now. The police will come by and chase them all off a block. They'll move like 4 blocks away, set up camp 2 days later. In 2021, there was an estimated 5,000 people living on the streets of Portland, Oregon. In 2022, that number dropped down to about 3,000. Now, these come from a point-in-time survey, as they call it. This is where they just do some estimating to figure out how many people are on the streets, because it's hard to get everyone in a line and start counting them. So in 2021, they estimate there was around 5,000. Other groups have it higher than that. But in 2022, it did go down around 3,000. So why did this happen? Well, most of it's going to be the easing of restrictions from the pandemic. People went back to work and they quit living in their cars. Then the new governor got elected, and on her first day, she declared a state of emergency for the homeless situation in most of the state. After the last election cycle we had, it was very clear that the people of Oregon, the Oregonians, are done with this and something needs to be done. They've had different policies and different programs before, but now finally the mayor of Portland is really doing something. I think he's getting the money from the federal government and the state government to actually make things happen. And I think that's why in the Old Town area where I was on this day, which used to be the hardest hit, looks like it's making progress. Did the new money and new policies and programs just make people unhomeless? No, maybe a few, but I'm sure about 90% of them are just someplace else still being homeless. I didn't go to every nook and cranny of Portland looking for them to find out why they're not in Old Town, but on this day, like I said, the hardest hit area, there were very few. I've been hearing that from a lot of people that are working downtown and in the Old Town area that I know. They say it's not as bad. Now, none of them actually work down there, but they have to drive down there for different supplies and stuff like that. They've all seen a noticeable difference. If you're from a city that doesn't have a serious homeless problem or hasn't had one in recent years, you probably just looked at everything I showed you and thought, that's horrible there. Well, compared to what it used to be, Portland's doing pretty good. They got a long way to go before they return to their former glory, which it wasn't the greatest when I moved up here in 2010, but it was a lot better than it's been in the last few years. Would I recommend someone moving to Portland, Oregon right now? Probably not. I might suggest some of the suburbs. Got some really nice suburbs, but living downtown is not a good plan right now. It's getting there, but I think we're still a few years off. If they do fix everything, I don't know what the people of Portland are going to do. Walk down the street without having to avoid someone asleep on the sidewalk? Watch 6 people go into a 2-person tent to have a private meeting? Yes, I saw that before. I guess no one ever told them that tents aren't really soundproof. There's a guy right now in downtown Portland that I've seen walk around with like a scuba mask, snorkel, wearing 3 or 5 jackets, and a Dora the Explorer backpack. All right, everyone, that's today's video. Go out, scare yourself a little, and be nice to each other.